a political rally in Karur, Tamil Nadu. It was supposed to be a massive show of support, a day of political energy. But it turned into an absolute, unimaginable tragedy. So what happened? How did a political gathering turn so deadly?
39. That's the number of people who lost their lives. And listen to this, among them were 16 women and 10 young children. They didn't die in some natural disaster or a terrorist attack. No, they died in a crowd crush, just waiting to see a political leader.
So you have to ask, right? How does this even happen? How does a day meant for political celebration end in mass death? To find the answer, we've got to look at how a series of, well, seemingly small failures all piled up into one catastrophic event.
Yeah, this disaster didn't just happen in an instant. It was something that unfolded in slow motion, over hours and hours. Let's walk through the timeline, because it really reveals where things started to go so horribly wrong.
Okay, so check this out. There were supposed to be 2 rallies that day. The first one in Namakkal was scheduled for 8:45 in the morning, but it didn't actually start until 2:30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, over in Karur, people started showing up for their rally at noon, but they were just left waiting and waiting. The leader's speech in Karur didn't even start until 7 p.m. That's a full 7 hours behind schedule.
And here's where a huge problem comes in: the sheer number of people. The organizers had a permit for 10,000, but police on the ground estimated the actual crowd was closer to 28,000. That's almost 3 times the expected number, all crammed into the venue. You can just feel the perfect storm brewing, can't you? You've got this narrow road baking in that intense Kongu region heat. You've got a massive crowd waiting for 7 hours, a lot of them with no water. People were getting exhausted, dehydrated. It was getting so bad that even before the main speech kicked off, ambulances were already trying and struggling to push through the dense crowd to get to people who had collapsed. So, in the aftermath of a tragedy like this, what happens next? You guessed it, the finger pointing. The blame game started almost immediately between the organizers, the TVK party, and the ruling government, the DMK.
So let's break down their arguments. The TVK, the organizer, said, hey, our permit was from noon to 10 p.m., so we were technically within our time. They also claimed the government failed on security after denying them bigger, safer venues. But the DMK government fired back, saying, no way, that 7-hour delay is what created the dangerous situation. And they said they only approved that third-choice venue so they wouldn't be accused of trying to silence their political opponents.
And then came this public statement from a TVK spokesperson. It suggests that the crowd waiting for so long was just a sign of their love and devotion for the leader. As you can imagine, that response drew a ton of criticism because it really seemed to sidestep any responsibility for the dangerous conditions that long wait created.
But here's the thing. To really understand what happened in Karur, you have to zoom out, because this isn't just about one rally or one party. It's about a pattern, a depressingly familiar one.
Does this cycle look familiar? A tragedy strikes. The media is filled with outrage. Politicians play the blame game. An inquiry committee is set up. But after a while, public memory fades, the report from that committee gathers dust on a shelf, and nothing really changes until it all happens again. The source material we're looking at puts forward this really powerful idea. It basically reframes the whole issue. It says that when people's lives are just seen as collateral damage for a political event, the real fight isn't between 2 rival parties. It's between the leaders who organize these things and the very people whose safety gets ignored. And then there's this number, 10 lakh rupees. That's the amount of compensation that was announced for the family of each person who died. It's a number that just forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question about how we value a human life after it's been lost in a preventable tragedy. Okay, so we've talked about the failures of the organizers and the government, but the source material challenges us to look at one more angle here, an aspect of accountability that often gets overlooked. Now, this is a tough question, and let me be clear, this is not about blaming the victims, not at all. It's about exploring the idea of a shared responsibility when it comes to creating safer public spaces for everyone. Just look at who died. Of the 39 victims, 26 of them were women and children. That statistic is absolutely heartbreaking, and it highlights a critical reality. In a chaotic crowd crush, it's often the most physically vulnerable who are at the greatest risk. So the source asks us to really reflect on this. In our passion to support a leader or a cause,
Are we fully thinking about the risks involved, especially for the most vulnerable people in our families? It's a question about our own personal risk assessment in situations that we know can be unpredictable.
And this all really comes down to a concept called civic sense. It's not just about keeping the streets clean or whatever, it's a much deeper awareness of our role in society. And that includes making smart decisions about our own safety and the safety of the people who depend on us.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. While we absolutely must demand accountability from our leaders and from event organizers, we also have to ask ourselves what role we play. If that's the price tag that gets placed on a life, what is the value we place on it ourselves? And what steps are we as individuals willing to take to protect it?